Hello and welcome to the demonstration of the Ascendix RE SmartClient. Prior to getting into the demonstration, I want to share with you our complete lineup of products so that as to have appreciation for the context of the SmartClient and why it was developed in the first place. We see here a wheel representing a variety of product offerings. In the center, we see two of our core CRM platforms, Dynamics CRM and Salesforce.com. On the bottom portion, we see the traditional methods in which to access those platforms through Outlook, through the various browsers, whether that be Internet Explorer or Safari or Chrome, and then the platforms, the mobile platforms that each of these providers provide, Salesforce One for Salesforce and Windows Mobile for Microsoft. And then on the top portion we see those very specific real estate solutions that Ascendix has developed for the commercial real estate sector. The XRE iPhone and iPad solution, what we'll be talking about today, the XRE SmartClient, and our recently announced XRE Composer, which is a publishing tool that allows for generation of both PDFs and microsites from all of the rich real estate data that's harvested and stored inside of the Dynamics and Salesforce solutions. You'll notice on the outer ring that we have two what I'll call continuums. There's a creation section over here in orange and the consumption. And the point here is that not all interfaces are designed for the same purpose. Creation interfaces were designed so that individuals who are tasked with entering in information into a CRM system had that optimal experience, whereas those that are consumers of information need separate interfaces that are more about viewing and searching for that information. And it's in that context that we start the story around our SmartClient solution. When we were setting out towards developing these very specific commercial real estate interfaces, we began our journey with the iPhone and the iPad, and that has material relevance for the SmartClient and why it exists today. You see, when we were developing the iPhone and the iPad, there was a completely different design metaphor and paradigm that was used in order to accommodate for those use cases. Being that the iPhone and tablets in general do not have a hard keyboard and or mouse, the way in which you design applications on these touch-based devices has to be highly graphical. And as a result of data entry being somewhat challenging, most of the applications used on these devices are more consumption-oriented, searching for information, viewing that, reading it, consuming it, and acting on it. And so it was with that design idea that we developed the iPhone and the iPad application. As we move into the next slide here, you'll see a couple of renderings, stills of our iPad solution. Highly graphical, search-based. You'll see search windows up here in both of these renderings. And in addition to this particular graphic, we see additional searching facilities that help you to refine that. And so the takeaway here is that when we design the iPad and the iPhone, completely different design principles than that which is traditionally used on the desktop versions of both Dynamics and Salesforce. So as we rolled out this product and got it into the hands of our customer base, there was a general resonance with it, lots of great feedback, and for those specifically who were spending a lot of time out in the field and gravitating towards this interface and getting used to how to navigate around it, when they came back to the office and were using the traditional desktop client for CRM, we found that the feedback was, well, we'd really like to have something that resembles the iPad experience on a desktop. Is that possible? And so that's really what started the whole process of thinking through how would we design an alternative interface for those that are on the desktop as opposed to that which is developed for the remote mobile tablet market. So that began our journey for the SmartClient. So there are a variety of drivers in our design goal for the SmartClient. First and foremost, I will state that this is not necessarily looked at as a replacement for the traditional desktop client. Remember the continuum I mentioned, the creation versus consumption. There are a number of people that still need the traditional interfaces, especially those who are predominantly tasked with entering in a great deal of information and are are working on behalf of other consumers, i.e. brokers and such. So it's not a replacement, but an alternative. But having said that, we wanted first and foremost for this to be empowered with search. Today's CRM tools, whether it be Salesforce or Dynamics CRM, they do have search facilities, but they're not designed the way that we've been told brokers want to see information. And so we had to first and foremost focus on optimizing search and making it very approachable and intuitive for that particular audience. Secondly, streamlined UI or user interface, meaning we've got a great deal of feature and functionality in the traditional web client for both Salesforce and Dynamics CRM, and ultimately it may be too much for certain users. And so we wanted a design principle to intentionally streamline this experience and not be compelled to put everything in this particular user experience. And the last pillar is that of speed, in that we've spent a lot of time working with large organizations who have quote-unquote big data. We needed to make sure that if we were going to be doing a lot of consuming of information and doing a lot of searching, that we needed to have a speed optimized. And so those were the three drivers for designing of the SmartClient. And with that said, I think what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and jump on into the actual application itself. And so I have on the screen here XRE SmartClient, and I'll do a real quick navigation of the various aspects of the system, navigation-wise and layout, and then we'll get into some use cases. So on the top here, as I've mentioned, we've got this focus on search, and so there's an ever-present search window that's available. Now, this search is slightly different from other search facilities that you might have seen, in that it is relying on a variety of indexes throughout the database. And one of the things that we've allowed for is that of partial data entry. And so in some search facilities, you have to spell out the entirety of the word to get a result set. And in this case, you can type in partials and it will bring back, in this case, properties that are related to the partial word of PRES. And we'll see that Preston Park Financial Center fits that particular bill. So the ever-present search facility at the top, regardless of where you are, whether it be at the company's level, contacts, listings, or what have you. Notice also that there is this push pin that's subtly showing itself here. This enables you to go across multiple entities in your searches. So if I had pushed the pin down for companies, contacts, and properties and then performed a search for, say, Dallas, it will go across all of those entities that I've selected and allow me to see records that meet that particular criteria, first in property, then in company, and now in contacts. And so we support effectively a multi-entity or a global search depending on which particular entities you want to search on. So in addition to the general navigation that you see here for the various object types and record types, we also have below this area an additional advanced filtering capability. So this is great up here for single condition searching and so forth, but when you want to start refining that and getting into even more discrete record types, these filtering options below come into play, and we're going to go through some use cases there. Adjacent to the navigation and filtering facility is the result list, and this result list can be presented in one of two ways. Thumbnails, as you see here, where when highlighted, a record will present the details on the right-hand side of that result set. In addition, we have what we'll call a more spreadsheet or list-oriented view for those who like to look at lists of information, and there are practical reasons why one would do that. I tend to default to the thumbnail when using and accessing the system here. And as was mentioned earlier, when you highlight a particular record, whether it be a company, contact, property, or what have you, the details associated with that particular record show up here in this detail area. Real quickly, we've got a header information section which can be configured based on record type. Associated with that are a series of icons that represent secondary records related to that particular primary record, in this case a property. Here we see a map that gives us the coordinates of that particular property. And then just to the right of that we have this panel, the recently viewed panel and workspace. The recently viewed acts as kind of a breadcrumb trail. So as you navigate through the system, regardless of record type, it deposits that record there so that you can go back and see where you've been and quickly reference those and actually pull up those records instead of having to do secondary and tertiary searches for the same records in the same computing session. And then as you saw earlier, the workspace has popped up. This is more of a static parking lot, almost a clipboard for your data, where if you wanted to go in there and do a quick search on a particular company record, you could go in there and pull over any one of those records from the result set into this workspace. So if we were to grab, say, Arco Holdings and just drag that over here, we'll see that it has filed that away and done so in an organized fashion, where we've drug contact over, a property, and a company. One other final note on this is that as you highlight a certain record, there are a set of action buttons that appear that allow you to take action on that record as opposed to having to pull it back up into a detailed form here in the middle of the application. So that's a quick orientation of the actual application. Let's get into some interactions here with the app. So I'm going to do a use case here. I'm a broker at a fictitious real estate company, Ascendix Realty, and I've just gotten back from meeting with Texas Instruments, a tenant, a prospective tenant of ours, and we engaged in some discussions about a potential interest in moving into some office space in North Dallas. And so first thing I want to do when I get back to the office is go in there and tidy up some notes. And so we see that we've got Texas Instruments here, and by having looked up Texas, typing in the word Texas, I get Texas Instruments. I've highlighted it, and now I can go in and look at a variety of details related to that particular company. Phil's the gentleman that I met with, but I also had contact with a couple of other people, and I want to add that particular individual into the database. And so I click on the Add Contact button, and from here I type in Richard, and Templeton is the actual last name. And by typing in those two pieces of information, we see on the right-hand side of this entry screen a window entitled Inside View. And that's an integration that we have with a data service whose job is to go out there and harvest and glean a bunch of business data, both company and contact records, using a variety of means, some of which are call down, some of which are social techniques. But what we've done is we've integrated with their subscription service, and with the hope that we could, A, facilitate data entry by allowing for records like this that are brought in to actually augment the input of the data and to enrich data that you may not already have. In this case, we see a good bit of information that would be beyond what we would have on, say, a business card. And so if I were to click Fill All, it would immediately bring in all the information that is related to Richard from that data service, and at that point I can hit the Save button, and I've facilitated the entry of that data, and I've arguably put in a great deal more information about Richard than I otherwise would have. And so this is a quick way to get information in, and just gives you an example of the way in which we've streamlined the interface. Now, if we were to take this a step further, we could actually go in and show how we add a note. And so because we had a meeting with them, we'll just type in some meeting minutes. Talked about lease space in North Dallas, and leave it at that. And if we wanted to, we could even go forward and actually add a new activity, as you can see here, and it gives you a variety of activity types. We'll go ahead and for speed move past that. So quick example of how you can enter in contact information, also searching for it. We saw earlier I did a quick search on records that are related to Texas. You could also look at, as I did earlier, Dallas. Noticing also that there are a variety of filters that have shown themselves here on the right-hand side. And we clear this master filter here and do a search. And you'll notice that the industry has adjusted here. There are a number of other industries that are listed, and we've got counts that basically represent the number of company records that fit that particular industry. And if I wanted to further filter, I could simply check on a box, and it would take all the results set and kind of filter it down to just those that hit that particular industry, in this case financial. So just one example of how we've supercharged this tool for search. All right, let's continue our example with Texas Instruments, where we've just gotten back to the office and fresh off conversations with Phil and Richard regarding their interest in office space for lease up in far north Dallas. And so coming back to the SmartClient, we have, in addition to the company and contact areas that we've seen up to this point, we've got our properties area here, which we're going to focus on. Again, reflecting back on the fact that they want for far north Dallas, let's go ahead and use our filtering tools here to get to some inventory that we have in our database. And so the first thing we'll do is we'll scroll down and we'll look at the filtering here for property type. So the first thing we want to do is filter down to look at just those properties that are of type office. And so after having checked that box, we now have a result set there as reflective of just those properties that are of office. Now they're all over the place. We see New York, Dallas, and so forth, and so we need to continue to refine that. And so we go down to the town or city filter here, and we can look at, say, checking Dallas. Perhaps we want to check on Frisco while we're at it, as well as Plano, all of which are kind of in the far north Dallas area. And by selecting those three geographies, it takes some of the properties that are not interesting to us in this example and gets them out of the list there. Now, as we scroll back up, we see that the property owner list has been refined. Refined meaning it's only those property owners that own those properties that are in those particular geographies, Dallas, Frisco, and Plano. And having looked at this, we noticed that Griffin Partners is in that list, and we've had some success in negotiating leases with Griffin Partners and want to take a look at which properties show up in the list. And sure enough, we see 2100 Ross Avenue and Preston Park Financial Center. Looking at the address here, we see Plano, so we start there. So we drill into Preston Park Financial Center, and by highlighting that particular property, we see the details of that property show up here on the left-hand or the right-hand side. First thing we want to do is look at the map here, and we can see that relative to Texas Instruments headquarters, which is located at 75 and 635, compared to where this particular office building is, there's a really interesting pathway to get there that isn't back roads and major arteries. So that's interesting and certainly brings this property into the short list, if you will. If by chance we want to look at some of the images that are associated with this property, we can filter through this carousel of images and get a sense for what that looks like. And these images will be used for other purposes here in just a moment. While we're at it, maybe looking at that particular property stacking plan. And so by expanding this, we get a full look at all the floors in the building, who's occupying them, and what are the availabilities that are presently in place there at Preston Park Financial Center, along with the leases and the expiration dates. So that's interesting, and after having assessed that, we see that there are a couple of opportunities that fit their particular needs. After having gleaned this information, we feel it appropriate to actually go ahead and send both Phil and Richard a brochure on the property, get them acquainted with what we know about it. And so to do that, we simply take our left mouse button and we select Preston Park and we drag that over to our workspace area, which we talked about in the overview. And now with the property being highlighted there, you'll notice that there are a series of action buttons that are available at the top here. The far right is a button that says Add to Composer. And at that point, we'll click it, and we'll notice down here that there is a bucket, a composer bucket, that puts the properties that we want to have a composition built for, a brochure. And so we click the Create Brochure button, and a dialog pops up allowing us to go in and search for templates that exist inside of our template library. And so I'm going to go ahead and search for one that is the urban gray theme. And by selecting that brochure, it brings up a preview prior to merging the information for the property. And after having confirmed that that is the brochure I want to proceed with, I click on the Create Brochure button. And now what's going on is it's taking all of the property data that's at Preston Park Financial Center, all of the availability data related to that property, and it's bringing it into this template that has data tags for the images that you saw on the property, as well as data elements like the property description, the location, the availability suite numbers, etc. All that's being fed into this template. And we can at that point click on the preview button and take a look at what it looks like by default. We see it's got the listing of the availabilities. And we can also edit. And so by clicking the edit button, perhaps I want to adjust this and have a little bit more higher def picture of the property. And so I click this image widget, and I go and grab an alternative image, and I adjust the brochure as easily as that. And at that point, I can save and close, and it will re-render that particular brochure with that new image associated with it, as you can see here, and go ahead and print that out and or email it to both Phil and Richard. So I wanted just to give you a flavor for not only the searching capabilities at the property level, but some of the extended functionality that we can take advantage of inside of the SmartClient. All right, so let's move to the availabilities area of the product. So here we have availability selected. We can see a result set of all the availabilities that are unfiltered, really. And as we have moved from properties to availabilities, we can see that the filtering tools are specific to availabilities as opposed to properties. You've got available area, date availability, and even some of the geography here. Also, all the while have still available to you the ability to do searches using the search window at the top, whether it be a particular city or, in this case, going back to our example earlier, a property. Typed in Preston Park, and now we've got the availabilities related to it. So other ways to access different information in the system. To kind of wrap up the demonstration, let's look at leases now. I'm going to unfilter everything, and we've got the entirety of our database available to us. And we'll maybe go for an example here on a lease comp analysis in that area that we considered for Texas Instruments. And so scrolling down here, we'll look at just those that are of office unit type. And further down, we'll go to the town and city, that being Plano, and we'll put Frisco and Dallas in there as well. So we've filtered by office and certain geography, but now we want to actually go with, say, lease expiration date, a certain relevant range there. So we'll take today, and we'll expand that search to, say, 2 years from now, roughly, and to get a result set there. And now we've got an interesting lease comp analysis that certainly could be presented in this thumbnail view, or perhaps in this particular case, it might make better sense to have this list view for a little bit more information being displayed in a grid. So that really concludes the demonstration of the SmartClient, enhancing your understanding of the search facilities are there, the streamlined nature of the application, the fact that we're not trying to have it be everything that the traditional web client is, and also the speed, and even still having these complex searches, the ability for this data to be returning as quickly as it has here. These are all things that are cornerstones and pillars of the SmartClient design. So with that, we'll conclude this demonstration, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.